Welcome to Sunday Night Prime. I'm Father Andrew Apostoli, member of the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal, and it's a pleasure for me to be your host for today's wonderful program. I'm sure you're going to find it very, very interesting. Before we get into it, though, let me remind you, if you have any questions or comments or even suggestions for programs, please send your emails to sundaynightprime@EWTN.com. I repeat that address, sundaynightprime@EWTN.com. Well, you know, we've come through the year of evangelization, but evangelization must continue every day in the work of the church. That's part of her mission, to proclaim the word of God. Jesus told the apostles, go into all the nations and proclaim the good news, the gospel, and make disciples of all peoples and all nations. So the work of evangelization always goes on. And you know, it comes in different forms today. We've got media, audio media, radio, and so on. We got television, but we always have what's been the ultimate, you might call it, media of all of them, and that is the written word. You know, when we know that the old saying was, the pen is mightier than the sword. You know, the message of the gospel was written, and so that message continues to go out in the world. We've got to have the means of doing it. And tonight we're going to focus on someone who's helping to keep, I believe, one of the most beautiful and powerful instruments of the evangelization of the word to our people, and that is the National Catholic Register. Our special guest tonight is Jeanette DeMelo, who is the editor-in-chief of the National Catholic Register. Jeanette, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Father. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you, and I know the people are going to get an awful lot from what you have to share.
I hope so.
Okay. Well, you are not only the editor-in-chief of the National Catholic Register, but you also co-host for Register Radio with Tom Price and Dan Burke.
That's right. It's a lot of fun.
Very good, very good. Well, you know, the title of our program today is Informing and Evangelizing Through the Media. And this is the written word, which has great power to change minds and hearts. So it's so very important, the work that you're doing, Jeanette. It's a real mission of the church.
I believe that. It's something that I feel empowered to do, of course, because I've been given this position, but because I love the written word myself, and I like to have the newspaper right there in my hands. I print a lot of things from the internet, but when you have that written word in your hand, it just feels alive and real. And so I'm glad to keep the National Catholic Register going. It's got a long history, and yes, I think it's doing a great work.
Yes, it is. I will tell you from my experience, I am one who reads the National Catholic Register. I catch up on what's happening all over the church. You know, sometimes we get some things through the internet, and you know, but when you catch up with so many little things that the Register covers and tells us about, you know, what's happening in different lands, different countries, you know, it makes the church, it's sort of, you've got like a compact eye view or bullseye view of the church.
That's true. The internet can't provide you what the written, the printed paper actually provides you, and that's a snapshot of a particular point in time. And it's something that you can keep. You know, the internet changes so quickly that it's really hard to have that snapshot in you know, 1 week or 2 weeks time, which is what the span that the Register covers is a 2-week span of time. And that way you can, you know, could sit on your coffee table and you could pick it up at various times, and then you can also pass it along to people. Sure. And I think that happens quite often, actually, that pass along rate of the printed newspaper. And I'm really grateful for what I do, because I know I have a very tangible sign of the evangelization that we do. So. Yeah.
And you know, it's a diversity of the topics you cover, the people you interview. There's people, you know, you're talking about bishops, archbishops from all over the world. Some of them I've never even heard of, you know, and you're telling us what they're doing and, you know, some of the great work that's going on. You tell us also the struggles of the church in those areas where the church may be persecuted, or they're trying to hinder their freedom and so on, as we even experience a little bit now in our own country, trying to limit our religious liberty.
No, we wouldn't be reporting the truth if we didn't talk about the tensions that exist in our world today. So that's certainly a part of what we report on. But it is a great pleasure to also report on the good news of the church, which doesn't get told in many in many media outlets.
That's right. So much good is out there. Right. Well, you know, Jeanette, the people are going to certainly want to know a little bit about your background, and you have a very, very beautiful background here. You come from a big Catholic family in New Orleans. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's right. I'm the oldest of 7 kids in New Orleans. I have a sister and then 5 brothers, and we have quite a span. My youngest brother is 18 years younger than me, so my parents were very busy for a long time rearing children. And it's a wonderful Catholic family, and I emphasize Catholic because my parents really witnessed to me what prayer is all about. I saw my parents praying every morning, and my mom frequently was able to attend daily Mass, and so I saw that example. And because I'm the oldest, I often saw her, nursing a child in her chair very early in the morning, praying the Rosary. And it's always been a sign to me of the power of prayer, the importance of prayer, and they handed that on to me. And that's really something, one of the best gifts my family gave me, my parents gave me, is the model of prayer. Yeah. Very important.
That's when you see it, that it really, if it means something to them, it's got to mean something to you. You know that, you know?
Absolutely.
The power of example. I know you were in the Charismatic Renewal for a while.
That's right. My parents, they were high school sweethearts, and they met in high school and dated, into college, and they were a part of the Charismatic Renewal, and this would be the early 70s. And so they carried that through in their married life, and so we grew up going to prayer meetings and things like that. There's a church, I'm from New Orleans, there's a church in New Orleans called the Center of Jesus the Lord that we used to attend when I was in high school. And that was very much a part of my family's style of prayer. And I very much appreciated that because the Charismatic Renewal really taught me how to be joyful in my faith. How to share it, because they're very evangelical in the way that charismatics share their faith, but also the importance, again, of the personal relationship with Jesus, the personal prayer time, and spending that time with the Lord. That was taught to me through the Charismatic Renewal, and I'm very grateful for what the Renewal did. It's very big in New Orleans, so it was. They had a very big youth group I was a part of, and that's how I was introduced to Franciscan University, where I went to college. So.
Well, you had mentioned to me before the program that your mom comes to the program that I've been involved in for about 5 years down there in New Orleans called Lord Teach Me to Pray.
That's right.
And so she's a very faithful attendee we have this beautiful conference every year down there. And I'm looking forward to going in 2014.
She was very excited I was going to be on this show, and she called all her friends from the Lord Teach Me to Pray group to tell them. And so, so you have some fans there. They appreciate your presence every year at their retreat, and they say that a lot of your work are a part of their readings each week. And I found that that's a very powerful prayer group. My mom has deepened her prayer life through that group, Lord Teach Me to Pray.
Yeah. Well, that's in the beginning. That's how I got connected with them. They were using some of my early books on the Holy Spirit. I had written 3 of them right off the bat. One of my first writings, actually, that I published. And so they were using some of that to develop one of they have like 3 parts to that program, and the 3rd part focuses on the Holy Spirit. So it's a wonderful thing. Well, then you mentioned too, Jeanette, your involvement, you're going up to Franciscan University, huh? And that had a big impact on you,
It sure did. It was very, very far from home in Ohio. I'm from Louisiana, and but it was, being at Steubenville, being at Franciscan University was like being in a cocoon, in a sense. I mean, I really got to be in an environment that really fostered my faith all around, friends everywhere that could foster it. But there I also grew in an intellectual capacity. My faith grew intellectually, which I had the spiritual side of it through the Charismatic Renewal, but the studies that I did, and I did a great books program at Steubenville. It's their honors program there. And then I did, for my graduate degree, Humanities and Catholic Culture, which is just a wonderful program of theology, philosophy, political science, history, and literature. So I got to taste it all and just see the way the church influenced our world, and influenced arts, and influenced history, influenced theology, of course, but particularly just how it influenced the world. And it lit my heart on fire, it lit my mind on fire, and I was definitely hooked on the intellectual tradition of the church.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, and probably you did a lot of reading too.
Oh my gosh.
About reading, you know, we talked about that, I mentioned that at the beginning, you know, so you know the importance of reading good material.
Oh my goodness, it was really
Did you ever
great.
think you'd ever be in the field of, you know, like publishing and being an editor?
Oh, it's funny that you asked. You know, at that time, my advisor asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up, you know. This was in college, probably my junior year, and I said, well, I really like to write. And he looked at me serious and said, are you independently wealthy? You're not going to make any money, find something else, is basically what he was telling me. But my first job out of college was for a small newspaper, writing, and here I am now.
Yeah.
So you know, God put that desire in my heart to write.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, but I guess I did think about it then, you know.
Isn't that amazing? Huh? You know, it's a very important thing when you said, Jeanette, that God put that in my heart. You know, it's one thing for somebody to spout off, you know, in a certain field of knowledge, you know, but it's another thing if that person loves what they're saying. You know, for example, you know, I often say when preaching, you know, I mean, a lot of priests preach, but one of the things that makes, I think, sermons catch people is when people hear behind the words, this person believes that. Right. This person is really convinced. And so, you know, when you love something you're doing, you really put your heart and soul into it, and maybe that's what has brought you so far. But you had other beautiful experiences, didn't you? You know, your work here with the Archdiocese of New Orleans. That's your hometown.
True.
Yeah.
That was my first job out of college. I worked in the Archdiocese of New Orleans. I worked at first for a newspaper called Southern Renaissance, a very small paper. And from there, the Archdiocese found me and said, hey, do you want to come work for us in the communications department? So I was the associate director of communications in the Archdiocese. This was really...
What did that entail, like being in some of the work there?
It was great. I was part of a television production. They had a weekly television show, and I helped produce that show. So I put packages together, and I used to take tons and tons of B-roll, which is the film and the interviews, and then I'd have to whittle it down to a small show. But I just loved interviewing people. I got a really joyful experience of interviewing people. So that was a big part of it. Yeah. Answering media questions. We did a lot of crisis management. And then also I did some writing as well. I kept their website going. Getting the news and stuff. And I supported the director, who was the main spokesperson for the Archdiocese. A lot of support for Catholic schools, particularly because Archdiocese had, at that time, had like 108 or 109 Catholic schools before Katrina.
I see.
And so there was a lot of news related to the schools and the promotion of the good works going on at the schools.
Wonderful. So. That's great. It's great. By the way, going back to that Southern Renaissance, was that a Catholic paper? You said it was
a small Catholic paper, independent, family-owned Catholic paper, and
nice.
I did that for about a year and a half. It got my feet wet in journalism and in editing. I was the editor of that paper, but it was a 1 or 2 man show.
That's got to be challenging.
Oh yeah, you know? I sold advertisements. I did everything. So
you know, it was like who was the comedian? He had the one-man band. He used to call it. You know, he played all about 4 or 5 instruments himself.
Yeah, this was the one-woman band.
Yeah, very good, very good. Well, we're going to be coming up to a break very soon, Jeanette. But I know you moved on from New Orleans and then into Denver.
That's right.
When was that? About what year?
2005. Katrina. I accepted a job 2 weeks before Katrina, and then about 6 weeks after Katrina, I moved from New Orleans to Denver. Very hesitantly, because at that point I wanted to stay in New Orleans and help rebuild, but God was calling me definitely to another place, Denver.
Yeah, that's a great, and I know you were working there also in communications,
right.
director for that. Big archdiocese, well, New Orleans, big archdiocese also, you know. Yeah. And you work with two diocesan newspapers, didn't you? There.
A Spanish one and an English one.
Okay, so you speak Spanish?
I don't.
No,
I can read it, but I don't speak it.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, Jeanette, this is getting so interesting, but you know what? We've got to take a little break now. Okay. Don't leave us. We've got so much more to share with you. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sunday Night Prime. I'm Father Andrew Apostoli, and our very special guest tonight is Jeanette DeMelo. She is the editor-in-chief of the National Catholic Register. Jeanette's been the first part of our program. It's so interesting. I'm sure people are going to want to hear a lot more. I know when you were working, we broke off at the point where you were saying you're working there in the Archdiocese of Denver, and you said you worked with Archbishop Chaput.
That's right. I worked with Archbishop Charles Chaput. He was, I was his communications director and his primary spokesperson. So that was an exciting thing to be doing.
Big position,
big position. Yeah. But also, I was on his senior staff, which is, the small group of people who advise him weekly on the things going on in the Archdiocese. That was a very special position for me to be in. And a great amount of trust that he placed in me. I was there for over 6 years, and it was just a wonderful, had a pretty big staff, and really enjoyed my time there, but especially enjoyed working with Archbishop Chaput, a fellow Franciscan.
That's right, yes. He's a wonderful Archbishop, and I know he's become a national figure. He really is a great teacher. He, has supported the issues that needed, support. He spoke out, and so he's really done a great deal. I know him on a little bit on a friendly basis too. Yeah. He was a Capuchin at one time. I was a Capuchin at one time. I mean, he still is connected with the order, but he's an archbishop now. But to know him, I got to know him, and he's very friendly.
I just thought of one thing he told me when I was working for the Archdiocese. When you work for an Archdiocese, there's always a fair amount of crisis management you have to do in the media, and things come up, whether it's at a school or whether it's at a church or whatever, things come up. So I was getting very tired of doing this crisis management, and I was just saying, this just isn't, this is not a job for a woman. I feel like I'm just constantly defending things, and that's just not my disposition. And he said, what are you talking about? This is the disposition of a mother. You watch a mother bear protect her cub, and you see how vicious she can be and how defensive she can be. And I just thought, he's so right. I have to stop thinking about it just in the mechanics of what I do defending the church. I have to think about it in terms of a mother, defending her young, or that fruit which is so dear, and that's really how I had to look at my work, and he helped me to do that. So.
Great. Well, I know you told me you were involved with a movement called Endow.
That's right.
Could you explain and share that?
Absolutely.
Because that had to do a lot with this very issue of women.
Womanhood, femininity. Endow stands for Educating on the Nature and Dignity of Women. It's an organization that started in Denver. The co-founder is Terry Polakovic. It's in its 10th year now, but it's a beautiful group that writes study guides on the Church's teaching on women. Pope John Paul's teaching. That's how it started. Yeah. I was invited to be on the board, but first I was simply invited to be a part of a group that was meeting at the Chancery to do this study guide, Letter on Women. And I thought, I have to figure out what this is. I'm the communications director, and I should check this out, very
also
rational.
A
woman. Rational, intellectual about it. I just need to check this out. And I went to these classes and just totally melted, like my heart melted. And I realized that I needed the influence of of these writings from Pope John Paul, speaking about the special genius, the feminine genius of women, the sensitivity, the receptivity, the intuitiveness, all of these things, the care for the human person that women have because they know how to care for a child.
We should mention that Jeanette is 8 months pregnant right now.
That's right, that's right.
She and her husband expecting their first child. It's very beautiful. And you know, Jeanette, let's take a moment here to share with our audience. Coming here today, she came all the way up from New Orleans, and we're filming here in Yonkers, New York.
Yes.
And she was supposed to take a flight from New Orleans into LaGuardia in New York City. She ended up in Boston and somehow managing to fly all the way back into LaGuardia and to get up here despite the weather, which was
right.
very, very foggy. That's what prevented
the weather
the plane.
tried to thwart our show.
That's right. So there's something special about this program. So, and well, you were a courageous woman to do that. You know, to come. You know, I was concerned that being 8 months pregnant, I want to make sure this wasn't too much, but you ready, willing to come and to share very beautifully.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah. So women, I mean, Blessed Mother, the greatest disciple of Jesus
right.
was a woman. Mary.
Well, it's just so important. My role on Archbishop's senior staff was a very interesting role because I was the only woman on that senior staff for many years, and so I had to remember that I was bringing forth a particular perspective that the men around the table were not going to have. And yes, there are intuitive men, but my intuition was different. It was coming from a female perspective. And Archbishop Chaput really desired my opinion on things, and he would always go to me and ask, okay, what do you think from your perspective? And if I started to get too rational, he said, no, what does your heart tell you? What does your intuition tell you? Don't go just to your head. I want the full perspective, because it's very hard for a woman sometimes to sit at a table with men and not to just talk on a man's level, a more, perhaps sometimes more practical level, a more productive level. It's, thinking about production rather than the human side of things. And so I had to really, I was grateful for the teaching of Pope John Paul to be able to reflect on that and then to reflect it in my work with Archbishop Chaput. But Pope Francis is calling us to this, to calling women to positions of leadership in the church, positions that perhaps they haven't held before. And I held a great position at the Archdiocese of Denver, and women hold other positions like chancellors and things like that. But it's important that we increase our visibility in the church in leadership positions, and complement the work of men in the church. That's our role.
Some of your greatest leaders in the areas of spirituality, even teaching. I mean, you take a St. Teresa of Avila. Where would we be without her teaching on prayer? You know, I mean, she had such insight and so loyal to the church that they bring, when a woman has got that femininity that she can present, that side of Christ's love, reflecting Christ's love, Mary's love, in a way that touches hearts, because that's what a woman can do. She can touch a heart like a man cannot. He can touch the brain more, but the heart, the woman just has that sensitivity. I mentioned to you, remember when we were discussing before, that at the Vatican Council, then that's 50 years ago, they were asking the bishops for topics to discuss. And Archbishop Sheen, he was, he said at the time, he was bishop at the time, he said we should discuss the role of women in the church. And they told them, no, we're not going to, because it's not important. And look at it now. Right. It's such a major, important area to make women realize how God is calling them, wants them to also be adding to the mission of the church in a powerful way, because they can touch hearts that we can't.
Absolutely, and Pope John Paul knew that. I mean, he didn't know his mother. His mother died when he was very young. That's right. But he knew the Blessed Mother. And he knew many women, young women and couples who came to him when he was a pastor, and he just knew that women needed to be elevated in the life of the church because of that femininity. And I think he knew that best because he knew our Blessed Mother very well. And I would say the same thing about Pope Francis. I mean, he knows the Blessed Mother very well, and he sees the importance of raising women up in the church to be in positions of leadership, not to be domineering or dominating, but to aid, to aid the church to reach out to humanity in this outreach that Pope Francis is so interested in.
Well, you have to think of St. Catherine of Siena telling the Pope who was up there in Avignon in France, be a man, do what you're supposed to do.
She was a strong woman.
That's all she had to say, and it got him to move from Avignon back to Rome.
She was a strong woman,
you
wow.
know? Yeah. So without women like St. Catherine, but all women have something to do. You know, they help to form, you know, the hearts, future Christians, you know, the children of today, future priests, future religious. I remember the story of Pope St. Pius X, when he became the Holy Father, or when he became a bishop, he showed his ring to his mother. He said, "Mother, isn't this a beautiful ring?" And she showed him her old, kind of worn wedding ring. And she said to him, "If I wasn't wearing this ring, you wouldn't be wearing that ring."
So true.
Yeah, so the power of women. Well, I hope that, you know, maybe in your own production at the National Catholic Register, maybe some writings will come out eventually on Endow so people can get to know what this means. And it will, yes, it will add to exactly what Pope Francis is calling for, you know?
I hope so.
Yeah. Well, we got to get on to the register.
That's true.
Now, I know you met Michael Warsaw. Huh? He's the head of the EWTN.
Yes. After the register was bought by EWTN, Michael started looking for an editor-in-chief. And he, you know, just started to inquire. And I was one of those people that he asked, you know, would you be interested in this, you know? And we met in Denver. And this was right around the time Archbishop Chaput was called away to Philadelphia, and I was a little bit of a crisis of what do I do? I've been at the Archdiocese for 6 years, almost 7 years, and I was looking for a possibility of moving to a different job, and Michael met me right kind of at that moment, and we started talking, and I became interested in EWTN and the Register. The Register has its roots in Denver, and I hope we can talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
But,
yes, we will.
But Michael intrigued me, and we talked for a while, and then beginning of 2012, he offered me the position at the Register as the editor-in-chief. I had not worked for them before. I'd written things here and there, but nothing much. So it was a delight to join Michael Warsaw and his wonderful team at EWTN and the team of the Register.
Yeah, it is a great team. I know, as I said, I personally read it. I'm good friends with one of your writers, Joe Pronishan.
Oh, yeah, Joe Pronishan's great.
He's great. And also, too, now you had studied in Rome, didn't you? You
That's
got
right.
a licentiate in, what was it, communications?
In communications at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross. And I studied with priests, mostly from around the world, but mostly developing countries, Africa, Philippines, some from Poland and India, and this just gave me a taste of the universal church. I saw how big the church was, how many things that are going on, and I really loved it. And of course, at the Register, we cover the universal church. It's not just the U.S. We cover, you know, what's going on all over the world. So
yeah, and were most of those who were studying there going into journalism in their diocese? Was that?
Many of these priests were probably going to be brought back to start newspapers in their diocese or start a communications office. And I've kept in touch with some of them. Some of them called me to ask me about the work of the Register, or when I was at the Denver Catholic Register, they called to ask about how we did the newspaper there or how we did various productions. So they were usually startup. Like, I'm starting a communications office, whereas I was going back to a church that had established communications faculties. You know?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that the Register began. Did you not say that it began in
it sure did.
Denver? Huh? What was it? You know a little of that? Can you share a little
so
of that history?
The Register began really in 1927, and it was born out of the Denver Catholic Register. A priest by the name of Father Matthew Smith started it, and he just had a big vision for journalism and in the church. And it was very powerful in the 1920s in fighting the Ku Klux Klan. That was very big in Denver at the time, and the Register is credited with really taking down some big figures in the Klan. And so it started from the very start. The Register really tackled the issues of the day and brought truth to those, to those issues of the day. So I owe a lot to Monsignor Smith's intuition and strength and vision in journalism. So.
I love the little quote here you shared. Jeanette, he said, let's see if I can find it here. I thought I had singled it out. Here it is. He said about the National Catholic Register, if you like a Catholic paper with snap, vigor, courage, here it is. If you like one that is easy to read, here it is. If you like one that will always be loyal to the church and has no selfish axe to grind, here it is. Boy, doesn't that say it all?
Here it is. That's truly what we are seeking to do now as the National Catholic Register, now owned by EWTN so many years later. So he set the pace, and we're going to keep it.
Okay, that's great. It's great. Well, Jeanette, we got so interested in this, I think we've got to take another break.
All right.
Okay, we'll be right back. Don't leave us. You can see how interesting this conversation is getting, and we've got a lot more to share with you. Welcome back to Sunday Night Prime. I'm Father Andrew Apostoli, your host for today's program, and our very special guest is Jeanette DeMelo, who is the editor-in-chief of the National Catholic Register, and she's also an expectant mother, 8 months pregnant at this time, and she made a courageous journey to get here today to share with all of you and all of us on a beautiful mission that she has in the church. Our program is entitled Informing and Evangelizing Through the Media. And this is the media, particularly of the written word, but she's also doing radio work. That's right. The Register Radio, isn't it?
That's
program? Right. Okay. And connected with EWTN. So you've got quite a mission there. Well, Jeanette, we were talking about then the origin of the Register, and it's been, it's been here. I mean, ever since I remember. I always remember it as one of my favorite papers when I was young, when I could get the copies of it. It wasn't always sent to our house or anything like that.
Sure.
But how is it doing now? It's really still growing.
It's doing very well. Newspapers have declined over the years. I mean, in the Register's heyday in the 1950s, when it owned various diocesan papers, because it was a system of newspapers, in the 1950s it had as many as 800,000 subscriptions or papers in circulation, 32 different diocesan papers. Well, newspapers have dwindled from those numbers. Secular, Catholic, diocesan have disappeared, And so our newspaper surely took a dip, but now, just since the EWTN has owned it in the last year, we had an increase of 29% in our subscription rate, in our subscribers. Right. So that's a great increase. We're moving towards 40,000 subscribers. We're somewhere around 36, but with that pace of increase, the 29%, we're really, really grateful. We of course invite EWTN viewers to subscribe to the Register and to get this powerful written word and to pass it along to others. But the Register, really, a huge audience is online. So we have a great website. News is updated all day long on the website, and we have a viewership, an annual viewership of close to 11 million visits. That's how many visits to the website we get in a year. Now, on a monthly basis, that's more like, let's say, almost a million visits to the website monthly. So it's very powerful on the web. We also have 35,000 that subscribe to our email. So the daily email updates that we send every day, 35,000 people get the register. So it's in their inbox, in their email, you know. So I really invite people to take a look online and decide if you want to subscribe. You can
How
go
can
to,
they subscribe? Did you mention that?
Yeah, ncregister.com. So ncregister.com, and that's where they can find the online version. From there, you can, if you go to the subscribe button, you can see all the different ways that people can get the register, you know, whether it's by email, whether it's by an app on their iPhone or iPad, Kindle version. We have all of these things, a mobile version, so all of these options that you have to have as a newspaper these days.
Sure, sure.
But it's really, we're excited about our growth, and we believe that in part it's the EWTN family that has helped us to grow in this way. We're very grateful for EWTN and their leadership in media, of course.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, they're a very, very powerful Catholic media. I know Pope Benedict had told one of the friars he shared with me, he said, the Catholic Church needs EWTN. So now it includes in the family now the register as well as the television, radio networks, and so on. So that's really very important means of the church getting its message out to our people. And so, you know, that brings us to a very important point, you know, the importance of Catholic media. And you had said, you had told me that Catholic media is needed more now than ever to tell the story of the church from those who know the church best.
Absolutely.
And Catholic media can provide context and depth that secular media can't provide. And we see that, don't we, especially with
That's really
the way
true.
they're covering Pope Francis. You
Right.
know.
And the reason, you know, the secular media doesn't, you know, it's the people who are giving you the news in secular media are non-religious. Most of the people, many of the people anyway, who work in media, whether it's television or print, but mainstream media, are non-religious. They're some of the least practicing people in the religious aspect.
Yes.
And so the news that they provide, when they provide news on the church, is just not going to have the perspective of someone who is a believer, you know, someone who understands the church because they've lived it. And that's what Catholic media can do. Those of us who are working for the Register wholeheartedly believe the teachings of the church, so there's a faithfulness to that teaching and a desire not to deconstruct that teaching, but a desire to actually explain it so that it can be understood in language that is understandable to the public today. But the great reality is the majority of people get their news from the secular media, their Catholic news, their church news from the secular media, and we see that happening with Pope Francis. The good news is that people love him, you know, when they see him in the secular media.
Sure.
The unfortunate news is that sometimes the message of Pope Francis isn't quite clear, and the context isn't quite clear.
Right.
So the Catholic media really helps to provide context to what's going on in the church.
Yes, very important because, as you said so well, Jeanette, you have to kind of be a believer to explain it correctly. I mean, you know, if you try to just deal with religious facts and so on, and sort of like moving pieces around on a chessboard or something like that, instead of really knowing what this all means,
right?
You know, and you believe it in your heart, you present it with a conviction.
That's right.
And a clarity that is often missing in the secular.
And it really reminds me, I mean, what is the work of journalism? Of course, we want to tell the truth. We want to tell the truth about events. We want to tell the truth about what's going on in the church. But the truth, it can never be divorced from love. That's right. You know, Pope John Paul, when he was canonizing Edith Stein, had said something, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't remember it right exactly, but he said, truth without love or love without truth is a vicious lie. One without the other is a vicious lie. We can't have one without the other. And so, you know, as a Catholic journalist, I'm going to tell the truth, but I'm going to do it with such a great love and affection for the church and for the teaching of the church that it's visible, it's noticeable. Hopefully, it's very noticeable in what we do.
That's very, very important. You're right. If you're talking about the church, but you don't have your heart in it, it's going to come out very sort of flat, comes out like lifeless, you know, and it doesn't really touch your heart.
Or like propaganda. You know, you know.
One of the brothers just told me the other day, and I don't know if it's actually true from Pravda. Now, Pravda was the communist newspaper, and it meant truth, Pravda, you know. And they were reporting on this competition between an American car and a Russian car. And they said, the American car won everything. You know, but the way they reported is that the Russian car came in second, and the American car came in next to last.
Oh.
I mean, isn't that a complete distortion? You know, I mean, what it's presenting is so far from the reality of what happened.
And that's why the register is so important in today's day and age, because there are many issues that do get distorted. Now, they get distorted sometimes because of outright hostility towards the church or towards the values that the church represents, and sometimes it's because those who are reporting it sincerely don't know. They just have not had an experience to know and to understand the church. One of these issues I think of is what's going on with religious freedom. So the Health and Human Services mandate that requires institutions to offer contraception and abortifacients in their insurance policies, you know, that's an issue today that gets skewed as a war on women, or, you know, the church not wanting to abide by the law. But yet that's not the case at all. This is actually a case of religious freedom, a long-held belief in this country that we have the right to practice our religion in the public square and even in the marketplace. And so that's skewed in the media today. Well, that's one of the things the Register has covered very well, I think, in the last couple years since we've been facing this.
Yeah, and of course, it's the First Amendment.
It's
even before freedom of religion is before even freedom of speech. And that was one of the very cornerstones in which this country was established, that the government shall make no law regarding the practice of religion or inhibiting it and so on. And you know, what I also hear is that a lot of the lower courts now, where they are bringing this up, you know, people don't want to pay that, it's all being thrown out. You know, you don't hear that in the secular media. They won't tell you that.
No, we've had some great successes recently, and now the Supreme Court has agreed to take this up. Take it up, Hobby Lobby and Castoga Industries, which are cabinet makers, that they're going to be have their day in court. Now, these are, you know, businesses, family-owned businesses, but they will have their day in court, and that's good. It's not, you know, we haven't yet seen a group like EWTN take it that far. You know, the nonprofits take it that far, but we sure hope that these cases build momentum. So.
You know, someone once told me recently that it'd be a lot different in the headlines if it's the U.S. government takes case against the Little Sisters of the Poor. I think emotionally it's going to have quite a reaction.
Yes.
You know, if they try to silence them or shut them down.
No, that's very
I don't think people understand the significance of this battle. And thank God we have a voice in the Catholic Register to keep reminding us this is what's at stake. I mean, it's an enormous thing.
Well, and you just bring to mind another thing that it's so important for the Catholic press to do. The secular press is very quick to talk about those things that make the secular press, and those are oftentimes crises of sorts or something that they perceive as being new and dynamic. Pope Francis is just, you know, he's a star for them because he's seen, the woman on the plane next to me on the way here called him the rebel pope. You know, people love the rebel pope, he's attracting everybody, you know. But the thing is that we as a Catholic press have to also report on what's going on in the church day to day. And so what goes on with the Little Sisters of the Poor and their operations and how they serve the people. This is all the good news of the church. And if more people knew the good works of the church, especially the service to the poor, to the marginalized, if more people knew that, I think they'd have a better understanding of what would happen if we weren't allowed to practice our faith in the public square, and not simply to worship, obviously, but to actually, what does the faith cause us to do? And that is good works. That's the missionary work or the care of the poor that Pope Francis is calling us to do.
And that's what we cannot neglect. Jesus told us to do that.
That's right.
You know, we have to be faithful to the word that Jesus gave us.
That's right.
You know, even in communist Russia, they, quote, gave them freedom of worship. You can worship in your church sometimes, you know, because a lot of them they tore down, they turned into military barracks and desecrated them, many of them being rebuilt. The faith of the people of Russia is thriving at this point. You know, they built in a period of 20 years, the statistics, they had built it began 1991, which is the year Gorbachev declared the Soviet Union ended. From that year to 2011, so in 20 years, they built from 117 monasteries to 804 monasteries.
Wow.
That's an increase of over 650 monasteries in 20 years. And someone told me recently that when they got their freedom in Russia, so many Russian men went to that Greek island of Athos, where there are the caves, you know, where the ancient monks used to live. There were so many Russians in there that there wasn't enough room for the Greeks who wanted to go there. So it's a great revival of faith.
Right.
And you know, you can't take it out of the heart of people. Bishop Sheen said, in the struggle between truth and anti-truth, he said, in the long run, truth cannot lose.
Right. He
said that because it'll come back in the hearts of people. 75 years under atheistic communism in Russia, and here's the faith flowering again.
That's true, and I think that that's one of the things we have to do, is to remind people of that truth. You know, in Pope Francis's apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium, he is talking about the joy of the gospel. And, you know, those of us, even when our faith is challenged, if we have that joy, if we show the joy in our families, the joy of acting in our faith when we serve the poor, when we go to church, then what we're doing basically is keeping the truth alive as well, because we have a joy in the truth of knowing Jesus, you know, and that's really what the Register wants to be able to do, is to follow in this missionary call, this call of outreach and this call of joy that Pope Francis is asking all of us to have. And we have to find new ways of doing it. So keep watch of the Register. We're going to find new ways of participating in this new call, the call of the joy of the gospel.
And there's where a good woman saint had a great saying, St. Teresa, when she said, God, from sour-faced saints deliver us. We don't need that.
Right. You know, Pope Francis says we shouldn't look like we just came from a funeral all the time, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, see, I think that what's probably hitting people about Pope Francis is that they're just not used to hearing a pope say that.
Right.
He's kind of direct, isn't he?
He's very direct.
He doesn't hold back too much. He just lets you know this is what we should be doing, and you know, you got to appreciate that. And I think he's touching many hearts. And he, you know, when they tried to accuse him that he's neglecting maybe some issues of our church, I don't think he's neglecting them. What he's doing is he's trying to, like you said before, we have such a beauty. We have such a treasure in the Catholic faith, the mercy of God, and so on. These are things people are looking for out there. You know, the people who are depressed, the people who are down and out and feel like, you know, they're so alone, no one cares for them. That's the people we have to evangelize.
Exactly.
See? And you know, once people start to be drawn to that, you know, all these other issues will start to solve themselves. People are not going to want to have abortions because, you know, they see what happens. What's the statistics, I think, of women who've had abortions for suicide is 5 times higher for a woman who's had an abortion than for a woman who's not. You know, once people begin to realize that, you know.
And I think he wants us to be driven out of a great charity, a great love for these people, not simply a horror of the sin. We must have abhor sin. We must hate sin,
Yes.
but to also love the person. He said we should be sorrowful when we see so many people who don't have a friendship with Christ.
Yeah.
And obviously someone whose relationship with Christ has been broken by a very serious sin it doesn't have that friendship with Christ, and we want to offer them that, and then
Yes.
also help them to be reconciled.
That's right.
So that's part. I think that's what's at the heart of what he's saying, and
Yes.
we have to look at what we talk about
That's
in
right.
order
We
to.
are, Father Benedict used to say that we are not the church of the Latter-day Saints, but the church of the present-day sinners. And we're all sinners. And, once you accept the fact that you're a sinner, you want God's mercy. Well, that's what I got to give my brother and my sister, because God loves them too, and He doesn't want them to be lost. See? So, marvelous work that the Register is doing. Do you have any up-and-coming things that you think might be of interest for the people to want to be watching for? You probably are.
Well, the biggest thing this year is going to be or soon in this year is the canonization of Pope John Paul II. And so, our coverage of Pope Benedict leaving office, leaving the papacy, made it to the Library of Congress. I forgot to mention that, but they kept it in the Library of Congress. They thought the Register's coverage was that good. But our coverage of Pope John Paul's canonization is going to be good. So I would tell people to keep an eye out for that.
Okay, yeah. And you got Pope John the 23rd, too.
That's right. I can't forget Pope John, the good Pope.
He was a good
Pope John.
Yeah. Everybody said he'd just come in and keep the papal seat warm, until they knew Pope Paul VI was coming back. At least Pius XII had told him, you'll be back, But God had other plans, and, the Spirit is moving. And thank you for the work you're doing so marvelously at the Register, Jeanette, and all your staff, and, But we've got to close now.
Absolutely.
We've had a wonderful program. I hope you've enjoyed it very much. I hope you'll get in touch with the Register. But let's say a little prayer. In the name of the Father, of the Son, of the Holy Spirit. Lord Jesus, you sent your disciples out to proclaim your good news. We pray that the whole world will hear it through all the media and through the personal contact, personal evangelization of each individual. But we ask you in a special way to bless the Register and its work, for it has been there for over 100 years, have been your tool to bring the gospel to so many. We ask all these things, Lord, in your holy name. And I bless all of you in the name of the Father, of the Son, of the Holy Spirit. May the Lord give you his peace. Well, Jeanette, we come to that part in the program now where we have to make a little appeal. It's important to be praying, but you also have to pay bills. And, Mother Angelica always said, please remember EWTN. And as you help EWTN, I'm sure you're going to be helping the Register, because they're all working together. All these great tools for evangelization that God has raised up in our time. And the world needs it, because there's so many people out there who don't hear that word. We try to get to them. Well, remember Mother Angelica's always her advice at the end of each program, put your little donation, whatever you can afford, between your electric bill and your telephone bill, and get it out to EWTN. You will be helping the cause of evangelization. May God bless each and every one of you. God's peace be with you.